Hello and welcome to Catalyze Music Academy. My name is Zaak Kerstetter. And recently on one of the streams I did on the channel, somebody was asking me about the matrix page of Wavetable. So I spent a little bit of time talking about it, and then I realized that not everybody knows how the matrix works and how cool it is and how this really makes Wavetable itself such a powerful synthesizer. So that's what I want to focus on today. I want to talk a little bit about how it works and why it's so cool and how you should start to use it. So for today, I'm going to be Morpheus and you're going to be my Neo. And I'm going to try to keep my matrix references to a minimum today besides that one. But yeah, that's what we're going to get into today. Before we dive into that, I do want to let you know that if you are enjoying the content on the channel, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Check out the Discord. If you want to support the channel, you can check out the Patreon. All of that is greatly, greatly appreciated. So diving into it, Wavetable really kind of thrives on modulation, on motion and movement. That's what makes it a really cool synthesizer. And that's something we're going to be exploring in a bit. But I want to talk specifically about how the matrix works and how it's put together, because it's not super clear at first, I don't think. So in the matrix, we have these 5 columns, which are basically our 5 modulation sources, which are going to be our volume envelope, or envelope 1, envelope 2 and 3, which are our auxiliary envelopes, and our 2 LFOs. You can access all of those mod sources right here. Amp envelope, 2 volume envelopes, LFO 1 and LFO 2. If you would like to be able to see both of these at the same time, you can hit this little triangle over here and that'll pop it up here. So now we can see all 5 of our modulation sources and our matrix down here as well. If you want to expand it even more, you can click right here and drag up, and then you can see everything all at the same time if you want. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to keep it simple and we're just going to look at it like this. So our 5 modulation sources, 3 envelopes, 2 LFOs, those can then be mapped to any parameter we want. And by default, it only lists us 3 parameters: volume, pitch, and oscillator 1 position. That's it. However, if you click on a new parameter, like for example, filter frequency, it'll pop up in this list. Or if I click on resonance, it'll pop up in the list. Basically, any parameter anywhere, pretty much anything in live can be added, not anything in live, anything in the wavetable can be added to this list, and therefore it can be modulated, which is why Wavetable is really powerful. It's infinite options for modulation. Before we dive into that though, let's take a look at the volume envelope, envelope 1. This one is unique because this will always control your volume, and there's no way to turn it off of your volume. So it's always going to control volume. And for those of you guys that are not super familiar with envelopes and ADSR, the way this works is we have 4 different parts to this envelope here. We have the space of time from the start, when I first play a MIDI note, to this peak right here. This is called the attack. This is going to be the amount of time it takes to hit the maximum volume of this sound. So if I set this to be about 1.45 seconds, if I hold down a note, over the course of about 1.45 seconds, it's going to turn itself up. Once it hits that value, let's turn this down to a second, it's going to take the amount of time from here to decay down to a sustained level. So let's set this also to be a second. So it's going to go up over a second, and it's going to go back down over a second. It goes up, it goes down, and now it's sustaining at the value that I set right here. So sustain is unique, and it's the only one that's not measured in time. So sustain is going to be a value moving up and down. And this is just going to be the volume that it will sustain at as I'm holding down the MIDI note. So if I keep this pretty low, goes up, goes down, sustains at a low volume here. I let go. Once I let go of the MIDI note, it's going to take the amount of time from here to here, which is the release, to turn back down to negative infinity. So if I do something like this, for example, this is just a brick wall of sound. As soon as I hit the MIDI note, it's maximum volume. As soon as I let go, it's done. Whereas if I do something like this, after I let go, it's going to slowly turn down. Like that. So you can use this to kind of start to sculpt and shape and move your sound around to make the volume go up and down in different ways. Really, really useful. We can also click on any of these little dots to adjust the curve in either direction, which is kind of fun. But that's just the basics of how an envelope works. This one, like I said, always controls volume. However, you can also use it to control other things. So say, for example, I want to make my wavetable position move up and down. If I click on this, we can see it's already one of the defaults, but it's highlighted here. And if I want to apply my volume envelope to that parameter, all I have to do is click here and drag up or drag down. So the number that's showing up is going to be the amount. It's going to be how far it moves in either direction. And it's going to take the exact same amount of time turning it up, hitting a maximum value, same amount of time turning down to the sustained value, and the same amount of time after I let go of the note to change the oscillator position. And you're actually going to see this kind of like yellowish orange move up and down each time I play a note. And you can actually see there's a little blue line indicating the shape as it moves up and down. And you'll also see it on the volume as well as the oscillator one position. Like that. If I would like to move it into negative values, if I would like to move it down, it's going to go the other direction. Like that. Each time I play a note. Keep in mind that if I were to set this to be all the way at the minimum value, and I have my envelope moving it into negative values, it's going to go nowhere because it doesn't have anywhere to go. So make sure that the starting position of this parameter is really important because that will also determine where it starts and where it goes. Also keep in mind that if I have this started up here at about, 75%, and I'm going up to 100%, it can't go any higher than 100%. So it's going to cap out at a certain value and just stay there for a while and then come back down. Like that. So watch out for like hitting maximum values. Sometimes it'll just stick there because it can't go any farther. Sometimes you might want it to only go a little bit in either direction. So you can just turn this to be very small amounts in either direction. And that's totally fine. You don't have to like max these out all the time. So this is the amount as well as the direction, which is really, really important. However, you might find yourself in a situation where you want your volume envelope to look one way and the motion of your oscillator position to look a different way. And that's why they give you these extra envelopes, auxiliary envelope, envelope 2, and envelope 3. So these can have their own ADSR settings, so we can control these to be whatever, look however we want. They're still ADSRs. And then we can map them to different parameters. And as I mentioned earlier, the volume envelope will always control volume, and you can't change that. But these two control nothing unless I tell them to control something. So if I want to apply that to, say, our oscillator 1 position, now I can turn this up here, and now I can have my volume envelope and my oscillator 1 position envelope be totally different. We can make them behave in whatever way we want, as well as control the amount here. We can then also pick different parameters. Say, for example, filter frequency. If I click on it, it gets added to the list. And say I want envelope 3 to control that. So now we can start mixing and matching all 3 of these together to create different kinds of motion within our sound. And you'll notice that once you add in a value for one of these parameters, if you click on a new parameter, it gets added to the list. So as you go through, you can keep on adding more parameters all inside the matrix, and it keeps on going indefinitely. Keep in mind, the important thing about these envelopes is they happen one time each time I play a MIDI note. So if I play one MIDI note, move up and down, each time it does that. However, if I would like something to repeat instead of having just one time each time I play a MIDI note, that's what we have our 2 LFOs for. So envelopes happen one time per MIDI note. LFOs are going to be repeating or cycling as long as I'm holding down the note. So if I would like to apply LFO 1 to, once again, something like filter frequency, I can just click and drag up here, and it's going to move it up and down based off of the rate that I set right here. And the shape that I set right here. So we can change different shapes. And the amount set here, obviously. You can also randomize it, which is kind of cool. Just picks different random values. And of course, we can also, instead of having this be set to hertz, we can hit this note button right here, and that will sync it to the grid. That moves up and down based off of the grid size. So a couple other cool parameters we have here. We have an amount control here. The important distinction between the amount control here and the amount control here is that none of the values within your matrix can be automated or MIDI mapped. So you can't like have a clip where this changes over time. However, this amount right here, you can automate and you can MIDI map. So you could like map that to a knob and have this change over time. Whereas this, the only way to control it is manually with the mouse, which is a really important distinction. We also have a shape control. Which will change the shape here. And then we have an offset here, which will change where we start in the phase. So right now it's starting in the middle and going up. But if I shift this, now it's starting in the top and going down, or starting in the middle and going down, or starting at the bottom and going up, wherever you want within the phase. Another thing we can do to adjust kind of which direction the LFO goes is if I go to negative values, it's going to go down first and then up. Whereas if I set this to positive values, it's just going to follow exactly what you see here in this diagram. Like that. That's basically how the LFO is going to work. So you can start mixing and matching all these parameters to create really cool, interesting motion and movement within your sound. So for example, we can also have an envelope and an LFO apply simultaneously. So for example, I already have this guy going at, let's set it at a pretty fast rate and a very small amount, something like that. And we could also apply envelope too. So by turning this up here to filter frequency, it's going to slowly move my filter frequency up while also simultaneously moving it up and down at a really fast rate. So let's see what that looks like. And then back down. So you can have multiple modulators apply to a single parameter simultaneously, and that's totally fine. Another really fun thing that we can do here is we can have one modulator apply to a different modulator. Once again, if we have LFO 1, moving our filter frequency, if we click on, for example, the rate of LFO 1, it gets added to our matrix, because pretty much everything in Wavetable you can modulate in the matrix. And then we could have envelope 2 control the rate of envelope 1, which means it's going to speed up and slow down. And we can play with settings here to make it behave in all kinds of different ways by changing the amount, changing the rate, lots of fun stuff you can do just by having one modulator control another one. Oftentimes LFO 2 controlling the rate of LFO 1 to have it change over time can be a really fantastic way to create cool, interesting motion or movement within your modulators. Another really handy set of controls that I think often get overlooked are the time control and the amount control. So let's remap this here, and let's have oscillator 1 position be something like this. So we have a little bit of motion both here and here. The time control is going to speed up or slow down the attack, decay, and release of all of your envelopes simultaneously, as well as the rate of both LFOs. So if I turn this up, you're going to see that both of these are going to start to slow down and be really slow, whereas if I turn it to negative values, it speeds everything up. Another cool thing about both of these controls down here is both are MIDI mappable and automatable, which again, nothing inside the matrix is. The other control is the amount. This is going to control the amount for everything in your matrix simultaneously. So we have, again, multiple parameters being mapped all simultaneously. This will control the amount of all of them. So you can turn this up to 200% or down to make it really subtle. Up to you to play around with those. Lots of fun combinations you can have in there. So one last thing I do want to mention, I talked about this in a video that I made a long time ago, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's relevant. If you run out of LFOs and you're like, oh man, I wish I had options for more LFOs, you could use the Max for Live LFO device, or you can also set up these envelopes to cycle. And the way you do that is right here where it says none, you click where it says loop. It will now loop the attack, decay, and release of your envelope, which essentially makes it cycle like an LFO. So if I apply this to my filter frequency, once again, just because it's an easy example, it's now going to move up and down based off of the attack, decay, and release. The sustain doesn't matter. So if I do something like this, I can speed this up. And use it like an LFO. And if I turn up the time on the release really high, it's going to have more space in between them. So you can mix and match those to also create kind of pseudo LFOs with that. Not quite as many options in terms of like shapes and things like that, but it's a really fun extra way to get more things cycling in terms of motion. So as I mentioned earlier, Wavetable really excels when you start to make things change or move over time. That's why wavetables are so powerful. And just to show you an example of this, or a few examples, if we take a look at something like, this wavetable from the complex page, sounds like this. Let me get a little bit less release in here, a little bit more sustain. It sounds okay, it sounds cool. However, if I were to take LFO1 and start adding some motion or movement to my wavetable position, it's going to sound a lot more interesting. Same thing is true for most of these wavetables. This one sounds okay. This sounds totally different. If I slow this down, it just like unlocks all these hidden sounds in these wavetables that, like, if you're not using them, like, that sounds way cooler than that. So if you're not adding motion movement to your wavetable position, you're really not getting the most out of wavetable in general. Another great example of this is both the formants, same thing applies there, as well as the noise. The noise wavetables, if you just play a single waveform, they don't sound like noise. Like, they're kind of noisy, but it doesn't sound like noise. But if I apply an LFO to that, now it actually sounds like noise. Same thing with a lot of these. That actually sounds like noise, whereas this just sounds like kind of like a noisy oscillator. So make sure you are adding movement to your wavetables. It makes all the difference in the world in terms of your sound design. Another really fun example of this is going to be the effects down here. I made a video talking about these a long time ago. These are really fun. We have some FM effects, we have a pulse width effect, and then this modern effects. If you turn the warp up, it's going to shift the entire waveform to the left-hand side. If you go into negative values, it's going to go to the right-hand side, which sounds like it'll be a lot of fun to modulate. Same thing with the fold. If you turn up the fold, it's going to mirror it in the center, and as you turn up, allows you to do some like also kind of cool, interesting sound design. So we could set this up so that we have one LFO controlling the warp, which is going to move it left and right. And then we could have a different LFO controlling the wavetable position. So to have this one control position, so it's going to be moving up and down while also being kind of pushed left and right. Which on view sounds way cooler than just that. And depending on how you have your LFOs set up, you could have one be really fast and one be really slow. You could have different shapes. Turn on some unison here. All of a sudden, we're getting a lot more interesting things happening. Maybe we could also have like a little LFO on the filter frequency. Do this one. A lot of fun stuff going on there. And then let's turn on oscillator 2. Let's pick another kind of weird one. And also have some more modulation on those. And let's put on some, let's use this guy. It just opens up all kinds of fun, interesting sound design possibilities that just like aren't really available to you if you are not getting the most out of the matrix. And right now I'm just using 2 LFOs in a couple of places, but I could really start to like mix and match and again have LFOs control LFOs. I could have envelopes control LFOs, vice versa. vice versa, mix and match and just like create lots of complex sound design with very, very little effort. And that's why I think Wavetable is super powerful and why the matrix itself is what makes that all happen. And if I want to, I could like modulate the amount here. Try out different wavetables. A lot of these are really kind of just designed for adding that motion movement to them. That's going to like really bring out a lot of cool, interesting, subtle textures and sounds in there. So that's kind of the idea here. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that is useful for you. If it is, let me know in the comment section below. Explore the matrix some more. If you've only kind of like skimmed the surface of what the matrix can do, really dive into it and see what we can do. And oftentimes I've found you don't need to modulate a million things. Just pick like 3 or 4 parameters that are really cool that you think sound interesting, and then modulate those and see what does to your sound and see if it brings it to life a little bit. But that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed watching that. Hopefully that is useful for you. And I will see you guys again in another video. Thanks for watching.